welcome back to another episode of The Human Role. Thank you so much for joining and listening in today. We are geared up for another great episode. Of course, this one is going to be around AI, but AI 2.0. So, of course, earlier this year, we already had an AI webinar with a special guest. So last week, I did a webinar with a good group of heavy AI experts in the HCM tech space. And so I wanted to bring some insight from that webinar to this specific episode, but then also kind of just share, my own insight as well and go over specifics of what we talked about. So this is going to be a short, summed up version of that. And then, of course, I'll share the link so you guys can go and watch the full episode if you like. But first, I want to say, so we are approaching the year-end madness in the HR and payroll space. So I wanted to just let everyone know if you need any type of interim payroll support, tax support, HRIS support, implementation support, any type of heavy audits, any type of W-2 reviews, please reach out to me directly. So my consulting firm, Transcenders Consulting Group, definitely between myself and consultants can help you all in all of your needs through the year-end madness. We're also approaching open enrollment. So if you need any setup supports with your brokers, carriers, new plan systems within your HCM platform, please reach out. Myself and my team would be more than happy to help you and assist you. So if you need any of that support, definitely just send me a message or an email or go through my specific website and then send a note through there. So, all right, so let's get going into this AI episode because this one had a lot of good insights within the webinar, a lot of good touching points. So the webinar that I co-hosted, it was hosted fully by a good colleague and friend of mine, Leah Joyner. So she is the founder of HCM Tech Advisory. You also, if you've watched some past episodes, Leah has been on an episode of mine where she shared her insight on implementation. And so from that stance, Leah has a heavy background also in the HCM and implementation space. And so she was able to provide her insight on how AI has affected her specific role and how she, has used that in her workforce, especially in the consulting side of things. So we also had Bob Pulver. So Bob is the founder of Cognitive Path, and that company specializes on responsible AI and helping companies implement responsible AI within their processes. And then also Larry McAlister. So Larry McAlister is the head of digital transformation for Nutanix. So as we started talking about AI, we initially got into the history of AI, right? Specifically what AI is between like generative AI, predictive AI, all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and cut over. We'll have Leah kind of just go through the background history of what AI is. And then Bob himself is going to get into a lot of like the differences between both. And then we're going to also get into some heavy talent acquisition supports and like how AI is kind of changing that world. And Larry provides some really, really, really good case studies. So really excited about this. So let's get into the nitty gritty of the back end of things when it comes to AI, and then I'll be back.
So what is artificial intelligence? Understanding the fundamentals is going to be key to seeing the relevance of it and how artificial intelligence, we've been already utilizing it and how we can integrate it into our daily work lives. So introduction to AI, what is it? So artificial intelligence is the imitation at its core of human capabilities in machines. It helps to perform tasks, typically requiring human intelligence. And there's different kinds of artificial intelligence. So different methodologies, and some of these we've had for a while. Machine learning. So machine learning is a set of rules, essentially algorithms. And an example of that is when you go to Facebook and that system has kind of understood your behavior. And it can see, for me, for example, I like Rihanna, the musician. So if I go on Facebook, I get a lot of Rihanna things to click on and see where she is, etc. So that's a form of machine learning. Natural language processing is exactly how it says. It's the ability to process the natural language and text, so spoken language and text, An example of that is Siri, when you can tell Siri either in text, you can type, or you can speak. That's natural language processing. We've had that for a while. Computer vision, that's the ability to open your phone with your face, right? Instead of typing in the code. That's just one example. Robotics, Chipotle just announced that they're going to start having a robot make their guacamole in California. Larry, maybe you've seen that since you're in California, or you'll be seeing that very soon. And then the decision making and reasoning, an example of that would be your bank account, where you may get text messages if it detects like there's fraudulent behavior happening. And then it goes a step further and it could shut down your bank account. These are just types of artificial intelligence that have been already in existence. And another thing, so the generative piece is a use of all of this. When we say GPT, it's using all of this stuff. It's been decades of, working to get to where we are today. So artificial intelligence in the day-to-day use. So we've talked a little bit about how we're already utilizing it. You can ask Alexa to play music. We've been using it to filter out spam, for example, for a while. And then the personalized shopping that's happening on Amazon through machine learning, that's been happening for a while. And other systems, not just Amazon's, that's just an example. So understanding that we're already using, hopefully that can help with, okay, we've already been utilizing artificial intelligence. It's not as difficult to integrate it into our day-to-day lives. And where we can do that, and we're already doing it, is through the chat bots. So employees are able to now text, ask questions, and get their answers. Recruiting is huge, huge, huge for artificial intelligence. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then learning customized training content.
Whether you're a payroll pro or an employee wanting to understand your paycheck better, we've got you covered. Tune into It's About Payroll for expert insights on payroll trends and compliance, or check out It's About Your Paycheck, the go-to podcast for employees looking to understand their pay and rights. 2 great shows, 2 great hosts. Listen now, brought to you by Work Defined, where payroll meets clarity.
All right. So lots of good stuff, right? The difference between what AI, specifically is. And I really want to just touch heavily on the specific history of it, because AI has been around since like the mid 20th century, right? I understand that there's a layer of this is where the wording of AI and the knowledge of AI that has hit most of us has really kind of like skyrocketed over the last couple of years. But AI has definitely been around for quite some time and has been built in the back end. We just may not have been aware of it. We may have thought that it was automation, when really it was AI, taking a hold of those things. And so now it's just becoming a lot heavier involved in our workforce. So let's go ahead and get to Bob's portion too, because he's going to go over the differences between the automation versus augmentation of AI. And he definitely has some really good heavy points, and also like specifically kind of like what that means for our specific world. So let's go ahead, cut back to him, and then we'll come back from there.
So one of the things I thought was important was to call out some distinctions in terminology, because AI is being used as the term for everything that's not done by a human. And so that's not exactly true. So there's a couple on these next 2 slides. I just want to call out some of the distinctive points here. First is the difference between predictive, what most call predictive AI, some call analytical AI, versus generative AI. And so predictive versus generative, you can take those labels quite literally, in the sense that a lot of the AI examples that Leah gave before were really based on analyzing data and trying to predict what's going to happen. I'm going to have this level of attrition. I'm going to have, these particular skills gaps. This is where I'm going to see, expected, drop off in my candidate pipeline, those types of things. So in the retail example that Leah gave, we expect, people that like Rihanna are most likely to also like, Taylor Swift or whatever it is, right? But it's all based on probability and prediction and statistics. Whereas generative AI is literally generating that new content. And so sometimes that's just understanding and trying to predict the next word in a phrase or a sentence, so that it can very quickly and seemingly like magic generate, an entire document or report. But the fundamentals are the same. It's sort of understanding those natural language. I think Leah put it really well. It's generative is taking everything that it's already known from its machine learning, from its natural language processing and understanding, and incorporating that to literally generate new content. And so those interfaces that we've become familiar with, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Google Gemini, it seems to understand, but it's not actually understanding. It's not actually sentient. It's just using mathematical models to sort of predict, and then it appears like magic when it hits your screen. But there are very different use cases for when you would use predictive AI versus generative AI, which we'll cover in a little bit. But I thought it was important to make the distinction of where it's generating that new content and where there's a lot of controversy over AI wrote this, a human being didn't write this. Well, hopefully it's working in concert with the human, and maybe it's just creating a draft, or maybe it's just polishing up your draft, but it's working with you and sort of augmenting your ability. So here, what I wanted to do is again, call out a distinction between automation and augmentation. So a lot of people say, oh, we'll just use AI to automate this. And I take a pause and say, is that really what you mean? And I don't want to become like the AI terminology police, but I do think it's important to understand, because some of the things that AI or automation are doing, it's either taking things off your plate, which is usually the case with automation, or augmenting the work that you do. So making you more efficient, making you smarter, helping you think through information, or maybe it's helping you coalesce and summarize a lot of information that would be too time consuming for you or your team to do in a reasonable time frame. So you'll see these sort of functions or use cases on the left. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but you can see where there's a way to use automation as well as sort of augmented intelligence for each of these use cases and more, where the automation is really focusing not necessarily just on routine tasks, but any task that can be codified into some rules-based system. Like if you ever did programming back in school, if then, or if this, not that statements and things like that. So it's very much rules defined, even if it's more complex tasks or bouncing between systems. Whereas augmentation is saying, this tool is going to be my thought partner. It's going to help me brainstorm. It's going to help me craft a report. It's going to help me write summary, some assignment, maybe even a presentation. The capabilities continue to increase. Automation is at a task level generally, although it can be extended across a process or workflow. But augmentation is really, how do we enhance some of our natural innate human abilities. So I just wanted to call out some of those distinctions. So this is a lot, but I give Microsoft's AI Center of Excellence created this slide, and I really like it just because it shows not just the breadth of opportunity and the use cases across the full spectrum of the talent lifecycle. So this is basically applicant to alumni, but it actually also shows, if you can read the details, I mean, it's really showing that there's involvement and interaction with AI by all the stakeholders within each of those steps, right? So whether that's a hiring manager, an employee, a candidate, or others, there's AI being used in all of these use cases. And there's even some use cases that I would call out within each of these bolded, categories, such as within, team and growth. There's AI-powered coaching tools. There's AI-powered executive coaching tools, AI-powered mentor tools. Every niche within, talent and HR technology, AI is being applied. Whether it's all being applied responsibly, I'll have to put my, police uniform on and go check them out. But that is one of the things that I think about, because I did get certified to conduct some bias audits for the New York City recent AI legislation. So I do think about that from an auditability standpoint and a transparency standpoint and a fairness standpoint. But if I were to just, cherry pick a couple areas, I think one of the things, I'll just highlight a couple things on the TA side and then a couple on the HR side. So within talent acquisition, we've got AI being used by the recruiting team. So that's everything from writing the job description to AI-powered sourcing tools if you're doing outbound sourcing of candidates, to the actual skills matching when you're comparing a resume to a job description. Almost every applicant tracking system, or ATS, is coming up with some kind of score, like either a match score or a stack rank or something like that, so that the recruiter knows which applications to focus on. That's not generative AI, that's just predictive AI, but it's still subject to auditability because you're basically using that as part of your decision-making process. Hopefully, as someone called out in the previous survey question, there's a human in the loop. There should always be a human in the loop. Otherwise, you are probably going to run afoul of regulators and legislators. But we want to make sure that this is part of the human plus machine sort of teaming that Leah was talking about before. You have to use your critical thinking and don't just discount applications. We should be trying to figure out ways to include people, not exclude people. But that's a challenge when you have such an increase in hiring volume, especially these days with candidates, which is the other side of this coin here. Candidates are using AI as well. They're using it to customize a resume. They're using it to write a cover letter, and they're using it to mass apply to jobs. So there's AI on both sides of the talent acquisition sort of equation, and so we just need to be aware of what the implications are to that usage, and basically AI evaluating other AI's generated content. So it's an interesting situation that we're in, but there's challenges, but there's a lot of opportunity for improvement. On the HR side, you've got AI being used to personalize, learning and development plans, to understand skills gaps, to match you to a potential coach or mentor. Almost every facet and subdomain within talent acquisition and HR and talent management is looking for or already applying, AI to their use cases, either automation or augmentation.
So next, Larry is going to guide us through a case study.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk about two tools that we brought in for talent acquisition. One's called HireBrain and one's called Find'em. So what I've been telling people is generative AI is going to have a faster and more profound impact on the developed society since the internet and maybe since fire. In 3 years, your job will be different. Your kids' schooling will be different. It's moving at a faster rate. Remember the old Moore's law that we can double our compute time every 10 years? That's already down to 8 years. So we are moving at a much faster pace than any time in history. In 3 years, we're going to look back at ChatGPT and giggle to ourselves at how basic that was. So prepare yourselves. Like I said earlier, technology gets you to the human interaction faster with better data. So what HireBrain does is, Leah talked about natural language processing. HireBrain tool is feeding the recruiter questions to ask the hiring manager of how to write the job description. And then it's recording that call and creating a job description that is very, very precise to what the job is and not a laundry list of skills. I applied for this job on LinkedIn that I have now because that HireBrain job description hit me square in the face. I was like, I can't believe this is a real job. And it totally matched to what I wanted to do. So you get the job description super precise in half the time, and it's done in 1 minute. You can now have calibration where it'll build you, here are the kind of interview questions you should ask for this kind of job. And it's super objective, and it starts removing bias because it's not, the hiring manager's words are not seeping into the job description, or the recruiter's mind is not seeping into the job description. You're describing it, and the tool is delivering the job description. And then it gives you, as a candidate, a true measure of what this job will be. So the number one thing it does is cut time, and 2, attracts the right candidates. So if you think about it, role design has to be tied to what the future work is. Where do you want to go as a company? Humans are really bad at writing job descriptions that way. So the tool, you're feeding the tool the idea of, we need to move more towards cloud and AI technology in this company. So that helps the tool write the job description with that in mind, no matter what the hiring manager is saying. They did an audit of 50 job descriptions, and we failed all 50 job descriptions because of human error. It had the wrong, like everyone had a different view of what the culture was here, or the same job for engineering had 6 different tasks that you had to do. So human job descriptions is outdated, and error prone and biased. That's just flat out. And these tools are actually helping you get away from those things. So Findem actually goes out into the market and finds them for you. So if you combine this really cool job description, feed it into Findem, we're saying we don't even have to post jobs anymore. We just go find the best person based on this great job description, how it fits into the company, and sourcing with AI algorithms. So the recruiting job is going from sourcing and selecting to having the 5 best candidates, and you're white gloving the 5 best candidates. So we're going to cut the 2 big metrics we're going to have is cutting time to fill in half and increasing the number of good hires by double. So we're considering good hires people who last 1 year. So we are making the bet that we paid for these tools to remove bias, move faster, and have very, very accurate matches. And we've had it less than a year, and the numbers are really starting to come in. So I just wanted to give you guys an idea of the power of AI in talent acquisition. This is just job descriptions and sourcing, and it's super, super powerful. You'll know, if you want to do workforce planning, where can we have the cheapest engineering labor that have PhDs in the world? And it'll tell you, Tanzania or somewhere. So workforce planning is super powerful now with these kind of tools, because it's stuff that's out there that would take humans forever to go kind of collate. So HireBrain and Findem as a combo is changing the TA landscape and the way we think about sourcing our own talent acquisition teams. The next thing will happen is automatic scheduling. So you won't need a sourcer anymore, and you won't need a scheduler anymore. And recruiters will be candidate managers and not people who are going on LinkedIn looking for folks. So LinkedIn is going to become more of a branding site, brand yourself, and as opposed to this is where I go find people for work.
Okay. And so the talent life cycle that Bob went over is a lot. I know that's a lot to take in for everybody. Specifically, when Larry got into, we're talking about what HireBrain, Findem as well. So that was another one when it comes to job description and how the sourcing role is really going to change, right, for people. And I know that is really scary. I have been saying for a really long time in past AI episodes that the human element is definitely always going to be there. We just have to become more strategic, right? So a lot of the smaller mundane tasks, I'm going to say it again, those smaller mundane tasks, we need to just make sure that we are allowing AI to handle that, but also be more strategic on the back end. A lot of times when it comes to these chatbots, right, we're going to be the ones building that. So within this webinar, there were a lot of questions around like how many jobs is AI going to take over from an HR stance? And inevitably, I think now we know that there are going to be some jobs that are going to go away. I think sourcing at one point might be a heavier job that will need to go away, but we do still need to have some type of oversight on that, right? So I would just say, just don't run from AI. Still encouraging everyone to be heavily versed in it, get involved in it, understand what it means, so that you yourself, if you need to start building another skill set for yourself, that you can absolutely start doing that, because that's definitely going to be, really, really important. So there were a lot of heavy key points that Bob and Larry both made when it came to the workforce and what this all means for us. So let's just get a hold of it, as much as we possibly can, and start getting into the weeds and being open to implementing it, because AI is definitely going to be an added tool. I know I've mentioned before, like we are all like the coders, right, on the back end, like we're the ones coding the system now. And so let's just continue to use AI as an actual tool. Think of it as like another person on your org chart per se, right? As scary as that sounds, so that we're utilizing it professionally in the right manner. Okay. And then also to touch base on AI and payroll, that, was my part of the webinar. So we're not going to cut to that. You can definitely go back to the link and look at it. But AI over the years has already been helping with automation from our side. So no more tracking of the manual timesheets and mailing those in to a specific location. AI has been plugged in and automated into the time clocks, and those punches in real time are routing to your HCM platform. When we talk about the payroll processing aspect of calculations, overtime, double time, tax calculations, those have already been pre-built within the system. And then all the dashboards that we specifically see now, right? So when you can see the turnover on the dashboard, when you're in payroll preview, you can see any type of error reports. You can see if an employee is missing certain punches. You can see if an inactive employee has an actual live pay or an active employee has no pay, right? You can already see that within the specific system. And I think it's really important to note that that has already been around and been implemented for some years. And we are still here with our jobs. Our jobs have been probably a little bit more relief that we're not manually calculating people's taxes and overtime and double time. Sometimes if you get an employee question, you might, need to go back to the drawing board and calculate that to show them that, yes, your bonus was taxed properly. But other than that, you're not having to do that on a per pay period basis. And I think that it has a lot to show for AI and how it can be helpful and can better assist our lives. So we're not kind of like stuck in that route. Another thing I want to also mention is really like what's coming for payroll and AI. And really good note that there's going to be really heavy enhancements when it comes to detecting fraud, right? So as you get like alerts, Leah had also mentioned in the webinar, as you get like alerts to your bank account and so forth, when there's something suspicious going on, very similar on the payroll side, when someone's time looks suspicious, if you have to schedule in the system and someone has worked a different schedule or overworked certain hours, those are certain things that'll be caught. And then on the global compliance side of things, heavy keeping up with the labor laws, those calculations, so that if even outside of an actual calculating taxes properly, but when new laws are spit out from the localities, from the states, from the feds, like it's a lot to keep up with, especially if you're not just in one state and you're in multi-states with thousands of employees that are potentially working remote, right? And so that could play a factor on taxation. The system is now going to be set up to alert you on those things so that, you don't have to find out about an issue when W-2s are already approved and sent out, right? Or when someone has waited till last minute to go file their taxes in April, and then a big change needs to be had, right? So a lot of that stuff is really good, to come. And I think it's going to definitely be helpful and beneficial. We're definitely still going to be needed, right, to complete the process to review, to really make sure and spot check that AI is, being implemented properly, but it is definitely going to be a helpful tool for all of us. So with that being said, let's kick it over again to Bob. He has some really good insight when it comes to being responsible with AI that I would like everyone to listen into, because this is really a really top heavy need for us. Like the data that we're putting in is going to a larger stance of people, right? So we want to make sure what we're putting into like a ChatGPT, right? We want to make sure that we're doing that responsibly. So let's kick it back over to Bob, and then I'll be back in just a moment.
I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is a core tenet of AI within the enterprise and AI transformation. Anyone can use a tool, but you've got to use it responsibly. We don't give cars to people without giving them a driver's license and a driver permit. I mean, you've got to learn how to use it properly, and that means in this case ensuring ethical use, ensuring fairness, transparency, and how the algorithms actually work. Can you explain how it arrived at its decision? Can you show me that you are mitigating bias, even though we know the data that all these AI tools and algorithms are trained on was generated by humans? It's historical data. There's bias in that historical data. So what are we doing to mitigate that bias? You can't eliminate it, but you can continually mitigate it. And you can continuously monitor how you're doing against that to check for adverse impact, which is where some of these newer capabilities around governance and compliance come into effect. We have to make sure that as we use AI in our decision-making processes, we're not essentially violating longstanding, pre-existing civil rights legislation, equal opportunity, policies and things like that. That's what the EEOC really cares about. Make sure that as technology advances, we're not violating these pre-existing conditions. So we really need to understand, is there a human in the loop? How much weight did the output of these AI tools or these algorithms weigh in your decision-making process. And in the case of talent acquisition, that means checking it at each phase of the recruiting funnel, because at each phase, you're making a decision whether to take that candidate to the next step or not, right? It's not just did they get the job or not, did they get the opportunity to move forward in each of those phases? And to Larry's point, where he's using a number of tools, each of those tools, if each of those tools is involved, each of those tools is subject to one of these audits if it's involved in a decision-making process. So the key is AI is only going to get used more and more. It is becoming ubiquitous. So it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're using it properly, but not just using it properly, to make sure that whoever's building these tools, and in a lot of cases that is the solution provider, but think ahead to when you have AI use within your company and you've been given permission with the appropriate training, et cetera, to create your own co-pilot, to create your own AI agent, to create a custom GPT within ChatGPT. You are now a builder. You are a creator. So you need that type of training and internal communication, and to take on that responsibility. So I continue to say, when it comes to responsible AI, we are all responsible because we're all using it, and we're all going to start building with it if we haven't already.
Alrighty. So yes, let's be responsible with AI. Please, please, please. Also, if you go back to the webinar recording, Bob also mentions and talks a little bit about AI governance. And I really want to talk about that from like a legal stance. So just like everything else, everyone out there, even if you're using an HCM system to help with your calculations and, to help with your payroll process, it is still ultimately on you if something is wrong and incorrect, right? So it's going to be the same thing when your company implements AI within their processes. It is still on you to make sure that the programming on the back end isn't built in to discriminate against any type of race, any type of gender. So the legal compliance on that is really, really important to make sure we keep up with, because the onus is on us regardless. So that's a really key factor that I want everyone to take away, and then just making sure that we are using it responsibly, because once you put the information into AI, it's out there. So just make sure that you're not uploading any really high-end, heavy, sensitive data that may not be clear. Hopefully it's clear to everyone at our level, but if it's not clear to you, just make sure that you're, not doing that. That is really important. But look, thanks so much for listening in today. Hope this was also very informative. Please check out the actual webinar fully in detail. I will have the link in the comment section for you all to click on and review on Leah's YouTube page. So just want to make sure that you're getting all the insights that you need. There's lots of great slides with lots of information for you to kind of just read through and take away. So please go ahead and do that. And then look, next episode, it's going to be lots of good details in the hiring space. So really excited. I also have another special guest, really good guest on for this one. So stay tuned for that in the next couple of weeks. But thank you so much for joining. Talk soon. Bye.